Netflix have made a lot of content over the years, with plenty of good, but also plenty of bad. However, arguably none have been as popular and successful as Stranger Things, a show that debuted in 2016 starring a very young cast, which swept the internet and immediately became a fan favourite. Since then we have seen these actors grow with each season, which leads us to the penultimate season, Season 4, which has just recently concluded after being released in 2 parts. As I'm sure many of you know, this season is different. It is a lot longer than usual, with a few of the episodes passing movie runtime length, with the finale even being longer than your average movie. On paper, Season 4 seems to be the biggest of all these seasons. It's up against some real competition here, so it doesn't easily claim first place, if it even does in this video. I will let you know in a minute, but this is one of my favourite shows of all time as of rewatching. It only really descends into poor quality with the Lost Sister episode, but even then it quickly sweeps that under the carpet and moves on. But as this is one of my favourite shows of all time and it has so many great seasons, all good, it's very hard to rank, so by having one lower doesn't make it a bad season at all. These are all fantastic seasons, as you'll see by my score, so just keep that in mind before you get angry at my placement of perhaps your favourite season. But without further ado, let's get into it. This is a bit of a dumb thing to say, but Season 2 is a very important season for this show, and you could argue, yes, all of them are important, and I agree, but this one isn't given enough credit. After such a brilliant first season, which we'll talk about in a bit, Season 2 had the job of having to follow that up, and this is the first time that this show had to expand upon the previous season, and that could have easily gone wrong, yet this one manages to stay consistent on that level. As it is last on this list, obviously it isn't on the same level as Season 1, but it's still very similar, besides, as I mentioned, that Lost Sister episode. Like any good second season, this one continues to grow the characters' relationships and their chemistry together, ultimately making every plotline feel more real to you as you care about these characters more. As I mentioned in this intro, it felt very harsh to put one of these in last place, but it is kind of obvious that this is probably the most forgettable out of the bunch, because even after a rewatch, although I loved watching this season, when I think of what happens in it, I was struggling to pinpoint whether that happened in this season or other ones. It doesn't stand on its own 2 feet completely like what happens from here on out, as there are a few similarities from the first one in terms of how things play out. One example that comes to mind is instead of the lights on the walls, they change to drawings on the walls and floors. Stuff like that, small details which just feel very reminiscent of the first one and more than just a nod to it. Watching this show nowadays, it's easy to forget where it came from, and Season 2 is responsible for one of the best character arcs I've seen, with Steve Harrington, who turns from a bit of a bully to this very likable character and a fan favourite to this day. His relationship with Dustin is one of my favourite parts of this entire show. So yeah, while this is a fantastic season of television, it may not be a surprise that this comes in at last place for you Stranger Things fans. Stop. Wait a minute! Take away your mouse or your finger away from the dislike button and hear me out. I understand that Season 4 was epic and huge in scale, and with its massive ambition it pulls off everything it wants to. I am seeing people say this is easily their favourite of the entire show, and I understand that. I don't have any complaints or reasons to undermine that, but this is purely my opinion. And personally, I feel like people are a bit on a Stranger Things high in terms of this new season, as it's the new content and a lot of things happen. It's common with any show when it delivers a good season that they immediately respond to that latest season, but forgetting how good the rest of it has been as well. I thought Volume 2 was perfect and satisfied me on everything that I wanted it to. It did bump up my rating a little bit. It doesn't cover up the issues I had with the season as a whole, and this is what I'm talking about, because they separated it and Volume 2 was insane and perfect. A lot of people are immediately forgetting about the problems in Volume 1, and don't worry, these aren't problems which are very poor to have. It's just a few things which I felt were the wrong decisions and hold it back from being the best season for me. So I'll get this negative part out of the way so this doesn't seem like a negative review, because as a season as a whole, as you can see by what I've said throughout this video and my rating, it's a fantastic season. So one of Stranger Things' strongest qualities has always been the characters and their dynamics, relationship and chemistry. And yes, they have been split up before and it's worked well. I felt as though only the Hawkins group were delivering on that front on the same kind of quality. Don't get me wrong, I liked and enjoyed the Russian plotline, and this isn't even the problem for me, to be honest, because it did its job very well, but the problem was the California group. Mike, Jonathan, Will, and Argyle. They certainly feel more integral to Volume 2, which is where it redeems itself a little bit, but as I mentioned, it doesn't mask over all the issues that I had before. Jonathan, Will, and Mike are perhaps the three blandest characters out of the leads. I don't dislike them, it's just how I feel, and made for their mission to be one of the weakest parts of the season. I wasn't a big fan of Argyle either. 1 or 2 episodes would have been fine, it was amusing at first, but as it dragged on and he became a part of the main storyline, it just felt like the joke was going on for too long, and the stoner stereotype got quite annoying. And not to mention he converts Jonathan to a stoner, which just seems like the wrong direction for his character and shows that they had a bit too much to handle in terms of the character department, as him amongst others just felt like they were robbed of a bit of development, especially given how large of a runtime that this season did have. But all that negativity aside, I still thoroughly enjoyed this season. It really justifies the length of it with an ambitious storyline, and to be honest, I think it was worth the 3-year wait in between seasons, as it shows how much effort was being put in, because if you think about it, some of these were on the standard of movies, and just think of how many movies that is that they were creating in that time period. The show is at its darkest here, leaning heavily into the horror side with some creepy imagery, and understandably so thanks to the new villain Vecna. From the beginning he seemed like a very terrifying antagonist, but as we learn his backstory he just became a much more menacing figure. In terms of performances for this season, they're all great, we all know what to expect from these actors, but a lot of them were pushed to new heights with the emotion, and the ones I think really thrive from that overall was Sadie Sink as Max. New arrival Joseph Quinn as Eddie was also great, as I found him a bit annoying at first, but as time went on, I liked his arc. And while the rest of the cast did a good job overall, there were a few moments which were really tugging at the heartstrings with Dustin and Lucas, especially in Volume 2. I could talk about this season for ages, even longer than I already have, but to summarize, it is the most unique thus far. I haven't felt this scared about these characters' safety in this entire show up until this point. It does disappoint with the handling of Jonathan and his plotline amongst that crowd in California, and to be honest, it didn't feel as cohesive until the Dear Billy episode. From then on it was fantastic, but up until then it felt a bit like they were still trying to find their feet. Should I stay or should I go? When Stranger Things first aired, I didn't have a YouTube channel and I didn't think about movies or TV shows in a critical sense. I really enjoyed it then, hadn't watched it since, so when I prepared my rewatch for this show, I was scared that it wouldn't be as great as I remember. To be honest, I even enjoyed it more and really appreciated a lot more that went into it. I was genuinely shocked to the extent that I love this season and the show overall, to be honest, and I was very satisfied. As I've mentioned throughout this video, the characters are what makes it work, and it's very difficult to have so many great child actors pull off something whilst being the lead of the show, and they all do it fantastically. There's never a moment where they dip in quality or moments where you're like, oh, it's fine, they're just young. No, they're living up to the standards of great actors in their prime in terms of age. The season as a whole just blends sci-fi, adventure, fantasy, and even comedy and horror in such a satisfying way, and a very even blend where it doesn't lean heavily into one side too much. It's just the perfect balance. It's very refreshing to see an 80s environment which isn't shoving references down your throat or constantly reminding you that it's the 80s. It establishes the time period and then just plays its story out, and it just feels so natural and a world that's lived in and not constantly trying to show off products of its time. The nods are nothing but homages to things of that time, especially with the whole group feeling somewhat reminiscent of The Goonies or even E.T., but even then this show just feels like something completely different and so unique that I don't think it can be fully compared to anything. Coming into this, I haven't actually looked at any rankings of these seasons, so I don't know if this is a controversial pick or not. But even so, I feel like I'm going to get hate for not having season 4 in first place. As I mentioned when I watched through this show for the first time, I didn't have a critical mindset of analysing films the way I do now. But when I watched it then, and even on rewatch, I knew that this was my favourite season. I loved seeing the characters transition towards being proper teenagers, and, well, not all of them, as Will still wants to be the kid that they were in the first season, and that just leads to some really interesting dynamics and plot lines and hints that are still going in season 4, yet to be officially confirmed in season 5. The complaints I have seen about this season is that the Russian plotline is a bit silly, and I don't really agree with that, to be honest. I do agree that the Terminator guy is ridiculous. It's fine to have him hunt Hopper, but to give him the strength of the Terminator is just a bit silly. As the Russian plotline goes, you know, you're talking about a show that deals with creatures coming in from another dimension. I don't think having Russians infiltrating America is that crazy. Although the characters are split up, I actually think the show benefits from that, and this is one of my favourite things about this season, is that it gives side characters more time to develop. Even though we spent time with them this whole time, there was still more to know about them, and seeing them just put into scenarios with people they haven't been with before was also just as fun. Every plot line was fast, engaging, and executed very well, all leading towards the final few episodes, which deliver huge amounts of tension and satisfaction, as well as emotion. And not to mention, the action sequences in this season have just been elevated to a new level and have some fantastic special effects. Those were obviously improved upon in season 4, but this season as a whole, as it's not on the same level in terms of scale, ambition, and even length as season 4, I still think this was more efficient with what it did, and therefore made for a very fast and very bingeable season of television. And that's why I have it in at number 1. Even sitting here recording this video talking about Stranger Things, I still feel a bit soulless from the 2 final episodes of season 4, because damn did they deliver, and that was just, I haven't been that stressed in a while. But anyway, let me know what your ranking is down below. I am actually really interested to see, because I haven't looked at anybody's rankings, and I want to know what people think about mine. I'm sure, without having to check anyone's rankings, that my season 4 take is going to be controversial, but hey, I'm not going to lie to you guys, am I? So if you could like and subscribe, that would be amazing, but I'll catch you in my next video.